So that's fine. April, who's just joined us, said, "Hi, I'm new to the page. I'm currently waiting on my DNA results, so I'm hoping to learn something while I wait." Well,
Oh,
you definitely will.
today's show is a hot one. It is a
So
hot topic.
we're just waiting for a couple more people to join, and I promise we'll get stuck in. Because as we said, DNA is going to be a hot topic.
Yes, yes, it is a hot topic. We're excited. We got so much going on today. Yes, I'm sitting in my car because that's where I get peace and quiet. Brian already knows that I'll be ready to chop my son Cameron's head off because he's such a pain in the butt. But don't get me wrong, that's my baby. I love him, but he's a pain in my rear. He does things purposely.
Uh, just like kids do.
But that's my sweetie.
So, okay, I'm going to get stuck in. So, hello everyone. Thank you for joining Donnie and I on our second show for Genealogy Adventures Live. So, again, for those of you who are kind of new to the whole Genealogy Adventures thing, my name is Brian Sheffey. I live up in New England. That's the wonder of Facebook Live. Donnie lives in one city in America. I live in another city in America, yet we can co-host this show. Donnie, if you'd like to, and said this is my lovely cousin, Donya Williams. Donnie, if you want to say
Hi.
hi to everyone.
Hello, family. We got a hot show today.
So, without further ado, no mysteries on this one. This show is all about DNA. For any of you who are active on Facebook and genealogy, joining Facebook groups and whatnot, no doubt you've come across just hundreds of people who ask all kinds of questions about DNA. So basically, this show is more of a kind of introductory thing. That's the kind of level that it's being pitched at. So to start with, there's three different kinds of DNA that people generally need to kind of get their heads around. So the first one, and Donnie is going to kindly share a link to a blog post that I've written about this. The first one's called Mitochondrial Dna. You'll recognize it better by the initials M for mother, T for Thomas DNA. So the way that DNA works, it goes from mother to daughter, and it always goes down in that unbroken chain. So we're talking about really, really ancient DNA here. Mothers also pass it on to their sons. I have my mother's mtDNA. Sons, however, never pass that on to their children. At least at the moment, that's the conventional wisdom. That's what people who know a whole lot more about this than I do have actually written about and said. So mtDNA, mitochondrial DNA, DNA passed from mothers to daughters, all the way down the ancestral line, also goes from mothers to sons, and it stops with them. And there's some interesting ways that you can work with that. With the mtDNA test that I took, it's through a company called GeneBase. And I got a really, really good kind of ethnic breakdown on my mtDNA, both African and non-African. And in terms of the African DNA, it was really, really cool because it told me how my ancient female ancestors went from the east coast of Africa to the west coast of Africa. And again, it's a hard thing for people to get their heads around because not that many studies have been done about it. We know more about how people went from East Africa to Australia than how they went from the eastern coast of Africa to the west coast. So with mine, they went from the Horn of Africa to Lake Chad. Looks like they stayed there for a couple of thousand years, mixed with a couple of North Africans, moved into the kind of hunter-gatherer communities in and amongst the Congo region. And from there, slowly just kind of worked their way west, where unfortunately someone was kidnapped and sent across the Atlantic. So that's one kind of DNA to work with. The other one is called YDNA, and that's the DNAs that fathers pass down to the sons, and it just goes right down the male line. And you can work with that very much like you work with mtDNA. It's told me a lot about my African ancestry, the non-African ancestry, and kind of how that DNA kind of went everywhere. Then we have what's called autosomal DNA, and that's the one that you're going to be most familiar with. For instance, Ancestry only offers autosomal tests. 23andMe, they offer all three. Family Tree DNA, they also offer all three. But in terms of Ancestry, they really do only do autosomal testing. And the way that I would invite you to think about autosomal, think about it like a stew. It's DNA that you inherit from your mother and your father, all kind of jumbled up, all mixed together. And one of the things that Donnie and I will be discussing in this show is it so important to get as many people from your family to test as possible? Because no matter how many siblings you have, no two siblings ever inherit the same amount of autosomal DNA. So for some of my ancestral family lines, my sister has a lot more of that DNA than I do. Or my brother might have more DNA than either my sister or I. So the fact that all three of us have tested has allowed us to really work with that DNA, really understand where we're coming from. And I think Donya's just shared a little graphic of me. So that is my autosomal profile. I'm actually linked to all of those different cultures and all of those different ethnicities, and it really has just been a really, really wonderful thing to work with. Donya, you want to talk a little bit about your experience with autosomal?
No, not at all. So my experience with autosomal DNA is I'm new for myself, but I'm not new for my mother. So I had my mom tested on all three sites, and I also have her her DNA uploaded on GEDmatch, which Brian and I will get into later as far as what GEDmatch is. And basically, for my mom, it's been very, very rewarding. My mom broke a lot of barriers because of, number one, because of her age. She gives you, a better sense of connection to those that were passed. Like the further back, and Brian is better to explain this to you guys, so bear with me. But the further back a person is, the closer you can get to them, the better. I hope I said that correctly. And my mother, because she's 78, and because, well, no, happy belated birthday yet again to my mother, because she just turned 79. But because of her age, she's connected to people like her parents, her grandmother. Now, her grandmother was born in 1867. So it actually gives us a huge chunk of information about who was in 1867. She also has her great grandparents who were born in the 1830s and 40s. So again, my mom's DNA was a huge, huge breakthrough. Now, I have a question up here, Brian, that somebody asked. Why are most of my matches on my grandmother's line both paternal and maternal? One of the things.
That's Rachel.
Yeah.
Is that Rachel's question?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
Rachel. So I can see the comments.
Yeah. Good. So Rachel, that's a really, really good question. And to answer that one, kind of going back to what I was saying before, autosomal really it's a hodgepodge. It's anybody's guess what they're going to inherit, how much of anything they're going to inherit, and who they're going to inherit it for. I honestly don't have a scientific answer for you. But what I can say is if you have siblings, it'd be interesting to test them to see if maybe they're pulling DNA from other parts of your family tree, other parts of your family that you're not pulling through. That's been my experience with mine. And as Donnie was saying, I was fortunate enough to be able to test my father's autosomal DNA. And because he's that generation earlier, he was matching a lot more people than either my brother or my sister or myself. Just because he had that generational, he had less of a generational distance to our connections than what we had. And working with older people's DNA, like Donnie was saying, can really answer a lot of questions. When it comes to African American genealogy, DNA is essential because after you hit that once you start trying to get beyond that 1870 census, and if you weren't fortunate enough to have ancestors to live to an old age, 90 years old, 100 years old, by the time they hit that 1870 census, DNA is going to be the essential key to unlock your family tree. I kind of think about I've got a wide variety of African descended ancestors who are both free and enslaved. But particularly with my enslaved ancestors, I tend to think of them almost as orphans. Because a lot of times all I have to work with, or Donya has to work with, or anyone from our kind of South Carolina family has to work with, are first names. And when you're dealing with a woman called Amanda, well, we know that, in our family tree, we can have as many as 15 different Amandas, all born between 1770 and 1805. And we're always asking each other, well, what Amanda is it? DNA can tell us whether that Amanda was a Williams or a Moss or a Garrett or a Gilchrist or any one of the numbers of the big families that we know we share a lot of DNA with. And again, DNA is how Donya and I actually got introduced. How many years ago?
I don't even remember.
I don't remember. It's been a few.
It's been more than 5.
Yeah, because I've been here for 5, so it must be about 6 or 7.
Yeah,
And
because you were still living in
Cornwall. I was still in Cornwall, England.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
So it has to be about 6 or 7.
Yeah, but to give you an idea, Donya and I, we knew immediately that we kind of knew who one set of common ancestors were, but when we started digging into our DNA,
we had no
6, 7, 8 different ways. That's how many common sets of ancestors that we have. And DNA allowed us to realize that. And we know we have more. Right. We know that there's more of them out there.
One of the ways that when I talk to people as far as DNA is concerned, one of the ways that I really try to explain it is you have 50% of your mother that makes you and 50% of your father that makes you. So you have half and half of each one of your parents. There's the other half that you don't receive. So when you don't receive that particular half, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not matching. Let's use Brian and I as an example. It doesn't mean that you're not matching us. It just means that you didn't get that part. That's basically what it means. So I guess the best thing, we can go into how we use DNA as far as Edgefield is concerned. Because Edgefield is a different monster. I'm telling y'all, it is not a game. So,
well, I'm going to say that there's a lot of similarities between Edgefield, South Carolina, and Quakers and people who lived in really, really small rural communities. Again, if you're Scots-Irish and your ancestry is in Appalachia, you will understand a lot of the pain that Donya and I and so many other people in Edgefield go through. Because technically it's called endogamy. And endogamy is when generations, and we're talking 7, 8, 9, 10 generations of people in your family are all marrying cousins. Jewish people are exactly the same, especially Orthodox Jewish people. Very small religious community. You can only marry within your community. That means that after so many generations, you are going to start marrying your cousins. And we can talk a little bit about how that confuses DNA too. One thing, especially for those of you testing with Ancestry, and that's really the only one that I can speak knowledgeably about, Ancestry will only match you up to about 5 or 6 generations. I've got that right, don't I, Donya? It's about 5 or 6 generations.
Yeah.
So if your common ancestor falls outside of that range, they're not going to show as a match, even though you are. So that's my caveat with Ancestry. It used to be a little bit looser when they first started, but they kind of changed their matching algorithm, and it's kind of reduced that generational distance. There are other services that you can use. I mean, if you do test with Ancestry, there's a wonderful service that's free. It's called GEDmatch, GEDmatch.com. Free service. You basically download your autosomal DNA. It also works with Family Tree and 23andMe. You download your test results, you upload it to GEDmatch, and you can start working on a chromosome by chromosome basis to see how you match. And again, just to show how crazy Edgefield is, I can't remember our cousin's name, But I just posted something up on Facebook going, it would be nice to break through some of our brick walls. Just post your GEDmatch kit numbers. Because every time you upload your kit, you get automatically assigned an identifier. So I'm doing all these comparisons, and one girl, I matched on 13 different chromosomes, 13 of them. People read, as much as they can. There's a wonderful blog called the Genetic Genealogist, and she explains things so simply and really, really well, and she gives lots of examples. So to kind of get your head around it, understand the terminology, because like anything else, you have to learn a new vocabulary. What's a haplogroup? What's a subclade? What's autosomal? What's mitochondrial? It's a lot. It is a lot to take in, but I promise you, it is absolutely worth kind of really wrapping your head around it. So I've been working with DNA. I've had a really, really fortunate experience working with a solid team of British genetic genealogists. And doing that over a period of 10 years, I've learned a lot from them, and I still have a lot to learn. But I can tell already, if I share, they're called centromorgans. So basically, we have a limited number of chromosomes. Chromosomes have segments. Think of them almost as partitions going down a chromosome. And the length of that chromosome, if you kind of start really working with DNA, you can get a better understanding of when your common ancestor most likely lived. So if I'm comparing my DNA to someone else's, and I'm seeing what's called a CM, a centromorgan of, say, 2.3, which is not an ideal segment size to work with. You want to watch out for small segments. But if I see something about the 2.2 to 2.3 range, I know roughly that's an ancestor who lived in the mid to mid-ish 1600s. And I can't explain how, again, it's just through working with DNA for such a long time that I know that. If I see that I share 3.5 centromorgans with someone, I've got a pretty good idea that the common ancestor that we're going to be looking for is going to be someone who lived in, say, the 1750s, give or take 10 years either side. And again, because of my ancestry, I know that if I'm looking for a common ancestor in the 1600s or the early to mid-ish 1700s, and especially if I'm matching someone who identifies as white, we're talking about a common white ancestor. Whereas if I'm sharing longer segments, and it's a person that's got from a mixed race background or primarily African American background, and they're coming from Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina, chances are pretty high we're going to be talking about a common ancestor who was African descended. Now, whether they were free, whether they were enslaved, you kind of get that through the common surnames that you have. And to kind of get really back to basics, when I first started working DNA, I literally stuck with my Sheffey line. That was the only line that I wanted to look at, because that was the one line that was the best researched, made the most sense to me. And I just literally went into Ancestry and I just typed in, you can sort your matches, you can search through your matches based on shared surnames or last names that appear in your respective match lists. So I was looking with everyone who had the name Sheffey. There weren't many, so then I started looking for other Sheffey names that I knew that I could work with. Started finding them, and then we just started comparing our DNA on GEDmatch, and started slowly kind of working through so I could identify the white ancestor who fathered my line. And once I actually got that matches, more matches started happening. And I think you've had a pretty similar experience, Donya, haven't you?
Lately, yes, I have, but mine didn't come until I got my mother's, and then I started using other family members. Like my cousin Tyrone's was that was huge. Tyrone's DNA basically let us know that he's related to us on both sides. He's actually my double cousin within my family, like within my immediate family. So his mom and dad are cousins. They didn't know it, but they are cousins. So it was Tyrone's, and I'm so grateful to him. And if he's watching, thank you so much, because he allowed me to, he's like, look, past is past. There's nothing we can do about it. We are where we are. Let's move forward. And that's the attitude that people need to have, that, you know, when you're doing this. But yeah, Tyrone's DNA definitely pointed out to us that there was not just endogamy in one side, on my grandmother's side, but it was also a lot of endogamy on my grandfather's side as well. And this is why DNA is so important. But this is also why DNA is very dangerous. Because if you aren't ready to find out information, don't do it. It's not something to play with. It is not a game. You may find out some history about certain family members that you were not looking for. You may find some lost kids. You may find some other siblings. It's not a game.
You can easily find side kids that no one knew existed.
Yes.
Or even on a really basic level, because I've been doing the Genealogy Adventures thing for quite a while. I guess people feel comfortable kind of reaching out to me and asking questions that maybe they wouldn't feel comfortable asking someone. So, for instance, I'll give you a couple of instances. I have people who I've been approached and contacted by people who identify as being white. If you've got blonde hair and blue or green eyes, that's what you're going to identify with. Can't blame them for that. And they do a DNA test, and they're expecting English, Scottish, Welsh, German, French, whatever, and they're happy with that. But then they get these like 2.1 African American, or like 3% Nigerian, and a couple of these people have really freaked out. One of them is, he's like, look, I'm a racist. I believe white people are superior to black people. How am I supposed to self-identify because I'm 15% African American? I'm like, well, I can't advise you on that. It is what it is. Seriously, it is what it is. That's part of who you are. All I can suggest is, you kind of take a deep breath and continue your journey. When you see something like that, I'm 15% to something that I wasn't expecting I was. You can't unsee that. You can't pretend that you didn't just learn something that you just learned.
That's right.
Again, so as Donya was saying, as light and fluffy as it might appear to be, looking at YouTube videos and seeing TV commercials, I agree with Donya. Do not do a DNA test unless you are fully prepared for whatever comes out of the woodwork.
That's right.
Would be my absolute best advice.
It's so not a game. I don't watch Who Do You Think You Are anymore. I don't watch, if it even still comes on. I don't watch Finding Your Roots. And I don't watch those two things because I don't feel like they cover African American research and African American DNA. I don't feel like they cover it well. What I do watch is a show called Relative Race, and you can only watch it on the internet, online, and it's through BYU TV. Right now, they're in their season 3, and they have a show where there are 2 black sisters. And so far, these black sisters have met 3 of their relatives, and 2 of them were white. Because they weren't coming across people who were black like them. They were coming across their white relatives. So yeah, you have to be ready to like really get into just all of this. When you start your DNA, know that when you spit in that tube, you are spitting in the tube of generations of your family, whether they be black, white, Native American, or what have you. And that's what people really, really need to understand. It is dangerous to walk into doing a DNA test thinking you're going to come out with one thing, and you actually, even if you come out with what you think you're going to come out with, it's something else that might be hidden, and expect it. Even if you don't get anything, I suggest you expect it. So, yeah, DNA is nothing to play with. Nothing at all.
Yep, it definitely has its curveball. Something else that I would recommend is if when you're looking through your DNA matches and you start coming across family names that you've never heard of before, coming across people you don't know, complete strangers, take a look at. I would probably suggest taking a look at your third and fourth level cousins. I think those are very realistic people that if you do a little bit of work, you can figure out how you're related to one another, even if they are of a completely different race than you. Do it for lines that are already very well researched, and by that I mean you haven't just stuck with your dad, his parents, his parents. I'm meaning family lines where you have all of their siblings, all of their grandparents' siblings, their great-grandparents' siblings, and you've really researched that tree all the way down. And then start looking for those names within your matches. Even if you don't necessarily recognize them straight away, take a look at, to see if you share a significant amount of DNA, and then work collaboratively with them. We've all heard the stories of, yes, there are people who don't want to be contacted on Ancestry. You can send the nicest, most polite request saying, this is who actually, you might want to put on this too. This is my one biggest gripe about kind of questions I receive on Ancestry. Oh, I see you have Anna Smith in your tree. How are we related? I have 22 Anna Smiths in the tree. Which 22 Anna Smiths are you talking about? So if you are contacting a DNA match, give as much information as you can. Give full names if you know them, including middle names, when that person was born, when that person died, where they live, rough. Oh, sorry, I seem to be lagging.
No, you're back. You're back now. I was just getting ready to let her know he's back now.
Okay, sorry about that. Wonder of technology. So when you're contacting someone on a DNA testing service, give as much information as you possibly can about the ancestors that you're inquiring about. So my advice is to give the full name, including a middle name if it's known, the year that they were born, or even a rough guess if you don't know the exact year, the year that they died, if they know that, who their spouse was, year of birth and death, where they lived. Because trust me, there are a lot of common names out there. So like I said, if you're asking about an Anna Smith, an Anna Brown, an Anna Williams, believe me, if someone has a tree that's over, say, 1,000 people, they're going to have more than one person with that name in their tree. So contact someone, contact that same family, and really try to work together for us to have an ancestor. That's just the easiest way that I can think of for an easy, straightforward, simple way for you to become much more confident with working with DNA. Oh, so Kevin just said, found 2 entire families I never knew about, researching my 4th.
Yeah.
Because again, the reason why I say I wouldn't go any, if you're new to this and you're new to matching and you're new to working with DNA, hopefully most of the people that you'll be contacting with will have most of their 2 or 3 times great-grandparents researched, done, they know the names of their children, all of their descendants. So that just gives you a much, much smaller pool of people to work with. Because Donya and I have been doing this for long enough now together that we're working on something called the Moses Williams Project. We have this man who was born in Virginia in 1760s, lived to the
69.
69, lived to 1884, so he was 115 years old, had 45 kids in 3 different states while he was enslaved. And we're using DNA to find his 45 missing children. We're also doing traditional genealogy with records and deeds and wills and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of identifying specifically his boys, the 45 of them, who are going to have different last names than Williams, we're relying really, really heavily on doing DNA comparisons.
Yeah. So with that being said, in the comments, I'm going to give you guys some links, because another thing that we're doing today is also rolling out the Sheila Hightower Allen DNA Memorial Fund. We are ready. I've already received a certain amount of money, so I'm going to be ordering kits very soon because of this, and they're just going to be sitting in my house. So far, because of the amount that I've received, I can order at least 5 kits. And I'm excited about it, and it's just one of the best things since sliced bread. But let me explain to you guys what this fund is. So the first link that you're about to see in the comments is the actual memorial fund itself, and where you can go to donate. This particular oh, somebody's not getting anyway. So basically the DNA Memorial Fund is a fund that's set up in honor of mine and Brian's cousin, Sheila Hightower Allen. And basically because Sheila purchased at least 40 kits, 40 DNA kits on her own, without nobody's help, with no extra money from anybody else. Doing this with kits running anywhere between $69 and $99, she spent anywhere from $3,500 to $4,000 all by herself. So because she just never asked anybody. It was the most selfless act that a person can do. And because of that, we did this DNA form, this particular memorial, to not only honor her, but to keep her legacy moving, because it's, that's why we're doing it. So the link that I just posted in here is a link to her DNA to donate. Now, when you donate to this particular fund, doesn't matter how much you donate. We would, $10 per person would be great, but we can't ask you for a certain amount. It's solely up to you. But for every time we get the amount of a DNA kit, that's including the shipping and the handling and so on and so forth, we will send it out. We'll purchase a kit. And in purchasing the kit, we're going to try and get as many people as possible tested from the Edgefield, South Carolina, or their ancestors being from Edgefield, South Carolina, dating back as far as 1769 up to 1950. Now, where do we get those dates from? We get those dates because 96th District, which is what Edgefield turned into, was the beginning. And so that happened in 1769. So if you have family members that were living in 1769 or 18, or no, let me rephrase that. Yeah, if you have family members that were living in 1769, they weren't living in Edgefield, they were living in the 96th District. So those are the people we want, because that was the whole group. And when we look at the entire group of the 96, it actually covers areas that we never really thought about. So take Barnwell, for example. Barnwell is actually in the Orange, if I'm not mistaken, the Orangeburg County area. But back then, it was all part of the 96. Same for Darlington County, same for Lee, or not Lee County, I'm sorry, same for Kershaw County. Just certain areas were kind of spread out. Anderson County, a lot of them. This wasn't, and I didn't even realize that until actually yesterday. But the 96 took up almost half of South Carolina. So we have to really get a good grouping. So that brings me to the next place. If you decide that you would like to get the test, what you can do, if you think that you qualify for the test, what you can do is go to this link that I'm getting ready to send to you, which is the DNA form, as soon as it lets me get to it. Okay. you want to pause for a second, you pause on. But I'll be posting that in there, and basically that link right there will allow you to fill out, do a DNA application. And basically on that DNA application, you will be filling out how you relate. Got it. Okay. You'll be filling out how you relate, what's your closest relation, things like that. And it'll be asking other questions that Brian will end with, as far as you know what I'm talking about, right?
No.
The show.
Oh, yes.
Okay. But it'll ask you some different questions. And once you do that, that will come to Brian, myself, and our cousin Loretta, who is also one of the people who is really deep into doing this. And we'll decipher on, who gets the kit. Our goal is to get, again, as many people tested from the Edgefield County or the old 96 district area as possible. The older, the better. Because again, it connects us in a manner to that back pass that will, really get us going. Finally, for certain, and soon we're going to be creating frequently asked questions. You'll be able to find them on the Facebook page that we've created for my Sheila Boo. So we've been busy.
Yeah.
We have definitely been busy, and I'm getting ready to give you the link to the Facebook page. Please like it, share it, get it out there, because as much info, we'll have all information on that particular page possible, when it comes to the DNA. We are determined to prove what Sheila set out to do, which is that old 96 is all related, dating back from 1769 to at least 1950. And that time period, the ending time period, is around the time for the Great Negro Migration, the second one, which is when our families started to leave that area. And then other families was coming in. So we know that it's, it may not be like that right now. We know a lot of people of our families that did stay there, but some didn't. And we understand that. Our thing is, anybody who connected to whose families who lived in that area between 1769 and 1950, you are guaranteed to be related to us. No problem. That's an entire county.
At least in one way.
Yes, at least in one way.
Yeah. So with that, we're going to open up the floor. So if you have questions about DNA, how you can work with it, some of the things that you're struggling with, please ask away. We'll be more than, if we can, we'll be more than happy to answer them.
Yes.
As I said, DNA just took my Genealogy Adventures was pretty amazing anyway. Just being able to find the records, the stories, and the lost history, and the ancestors that I did. Genealogy has given me an identity that I don't think I could have had any other way. Well, the DNA Adventures has really kind of pushed that envelope back. If you could have told a little 6-year-old me growing up in Connecticut that I was genetically connected to presidents of the United States, colonial governors, Charles Drew, the man who created blood plasma, African American who created blood plasma, I would have been, get out of here. There's no way. But all of those hidden stories, all of those lost stories, are as much wrapped up in our DNA and are as much a part of us as any others. And again, has just led Donya and I, on really, kind of a discovery after discovery after discovery. Some of them are funny, some of them are really powerful, some of them kind of are a little bit upsetting, but that's genealogy. It is what it is. Can't really apologize for that. And I really wouldn't have it any other way. And all of you are being really coy. There's not one of you that has a question.
I know. Why? What's going on, y'all? Come on. We told y'all to come ready, come prepared. Just come ready. So, okay, here's something. This morning, did somebody write a question?
So we have a question from Tiffany. Hello, I'm from Louisiana. and my Simons or Simmons family come from South Carolina. Oh,
Mm,
we've got that name. My
I
second
got it.
great my second great grandfather Monday and his brother Ufler were born in South Carolina and settled into. Oh, sorry, it's cut me off on that one.
Okay.
Tiffany, do you know what part of South Carolina they came from?
It says Point Coupe Parish in Louisiana. I can read it. And then, okay, she says, hello, I am from Louisiana, and my Simmons family came from South Carolina. My second great grandfather, Monday Simmons, and his brother, Ufler Simmons, were born in South Carolina. They settled in Point Coupe Parish in Louisiana. Last night, I went through all of the 1870 census and listed all of the South Carolina persons to share. I do not know where. That is what I look for.
Well, one
Um,
thing you can do is kind of working from front to back. So it's working with the information that you do know. Do you know, for instance, if they were enslaved? Because I shouldn't assume that they were, but if they were enslaved, do you know who their last set of enslavers were? From there, you can start looking into that family's probate to see if your ancestors were handed down generation after generation. Again, with Black genealogy, especially if you have enslaved ancestors, it's not enough to just work on your Black side of the family. You also have to build trees for the families that enslaved your ancestors to be able to track through wills, slave deeds, any kind of record, um, to trace them back to see where they came from. Because chances are, obviously, if your ancestors were coming from South Carolina to Louisiana, they did, and they were enslaved, they didn't get there under their own steam. So it really is
hmm.
kind of tracking and tracing their journey indirectly through the white families that owned them. So I'm catching a name. There's a Pringles name in there. Oh, so okay. So yeah, it's going to be a question of where did the Pringles come from?
Right.
That
You're going
seems
to
as
have to
though
go backwards.
yeah, and that from what I'm sensing, from what you're saying that even the Pringles are like a brick wall for you. Um, Depending on where you are in Louisiana, I know that there's some really, really excellent genealogy groups in Louisiana. I had the privilege of actually speaking to one of them last year. Get in touch with them. Um, Everyone that I met in Louisiana who comes from different genealogical societies, really friendly, really approachable, and really keen to help people uncover their ancestry. So that might be a route that you can go.
We have another question with April. She said, I do. I guess she's raising her hand. As I said before, I'm waiting on my results. My Native American ancestors were from North and South Carolina, migrated to Georgia, and then to Alabama. They are not listed on any of the Indian roll books. What should I look for with my results to help prove my ancestry? Mm. Yeah, Brian, go ahead and answer her question.
Okay. Yeah, Native American DNA, you have opened up a can of worms.
Yep.
So I'm going to spend a little time talking about that. So on the one hand, I'm not going to say it's rare for Native American to turn up because that's not really how I want to say it. Native American can drop out of people's DNA results very quickly because in order to have a significant amount of it would mean that you would have to have more than just one Native American ancestor, marrying other ancestors of yours and producing children for that DNA to pass down. I guess in genealogical terms, in terms of DNA, it's called washed out. Um, Native American DNA washes out very, very quickly. That's the one thing. The other thing is, as a population, Native Americans, and I don't have the stat readily to hand, only a small number of Native Americans have actually done DNA testing. So
Mm-hmm.
there's very little DNA to compare our DNA to understand our Native American component. So that's worth bearing in mind. So I hope that answers that one. Well, so I've submitted large rolls for my Native American ancestors who are both who are tri-racial, who are black, white, and Native American. Oh, sorry.
You're
Something in
breaking
the
up, Brian.
background.
Start over. Start over. You started breaking up.
Okay, yeah, something was kicking into the background. So, in terms of some of my triracial ancestors who were Native American, African, and European, when they started applying to the Dawes rolls and the various Indian rolls in the 1920s, because they were black, they were denied. So it didn't matter that they could actually prove that they had Native American. They actually put on their application, I belong to this tribe. The Native American was my great grandparents, my great great grandparents. Didn't matter. We know what the United States was like in the 1920s. And as I said, unfortunately for them, because they were also black, they couldn't claim Native American ancestry. So that is a tough one for you to overcome. What I would suggest is if you know the Indian confederacies that your people belong to, if you know the tribe that your people belong to, reach out to some of the elders from that particular tribe, especially if there's somebody here, and have this conversation.
You broke up again just now.
I broke up again. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Um, that's what I've done with my Pamunkey. I slaughter that tribe name, something awful, but the Pamunkey, they've been brilliant in terms of filling me in about kind of tribal history, who my Native American ancestors were. They've told me more about them than I thought I would ever be able to find out. So that might be
Wow.
another route for you to go. You may not get official recognition, but they're the best people to speak to about that. The other thing that I wanted to mention about DNA before I go to answer the next question. One of the things that I see time and time again, especially amongst Black DNA genealogy groups, is can I ever find the name of the tribe that I belong to? And the short answer for me is always no.
No.
Because in order to belong to just one tribe means that all of your ancestors would have to come from there. So we're talking, we have 4 grandparents, 8 great grandparents, 16 beyond that,
16,
32 beyond that,
32,
64 beyond that.
64.
There is no way that all 64 of your enslaved African ancestors are going to come from the same tribe. It's impossible. So that's why I always say it's just not possible to get that one singular tribal identity. And I get why people want to have that. But in a way, I kind of think that my experience has been a lot richer because I kind of accepted that from the beginning. So instead of one tribe, I can list like 12. I'm like, this tribe, this tribe, this tribe, this tribe, and I've gone up and I've learned quite a bit about those 12 or 13 tribes or cultures that I belong to. And I think that's the best the rubber to get. Um, and I'm kind of being brutally honest, but and for African Americans, it is what it is.
So
You have some thoughts on that?
yeah, I believe this. I agree with the same thing. That actually answers the question because I was going to go with some of the questions that you and I had talked about the other day. Um, that actually goes with that question of if you do the African ancestry DNA testing, because one of the things that they actually say is that they can pinpoint a tribe. I personally just don't agree with them being able to do that because we have so many family members who, that we're going back to. And unless you're going back to the overall, like, I mean, I just don't see how it can be done. I don't see how out of the 64 grandparents, like he said, and that, you see, 64 would be your 3 or 4 time great grandparents. How do you know that all of them came from that same spot? Like I have yet to understand that. So I personally have not done the African ancestry DNA test, and I don't think I'm going to. I don't think they're going to give me the same. I don't think they're going to give me anything different. Um, the other thing that I wanted to say as far as DNA was concerned is that, and this is a question for you again, Brian. One of the things that people have have had the misconception, they don't understand, is that when you're doing the test, you have your X chromosome, you have your Y chromosome. The Y is for the men, the X is for the women. A lot of women believe that they cannot be tested. And even though I know Brian went over this at the very beginning, the autosomal really does cover both sides, because you don't see, you might do your test. Like, for example, now that I've done my test on Ancestry and my mom is there are people that are relating to me that are not relating to my mother. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're not related to her, but they also have a big possibility that they relate to my father. And a couple of them actually do. Like, I found people on my father's side. I've found information about my dad's side of the family. So, that's what it is. You're going to get your father's side. There's no such thing as not being able to test a woman to find out information about her dad's side, because your dad has 50% of his genes in you. So not only are you going to find out stuff about your father's side, you're going to find out stuff about your father's mother, about your father's father. You're going to get that information, because just like it took 50% of each one of them to create you, it took 50% of each one of their parents to create them, and so on and so forth. So, Brian, there's another question. Renee Scott Harris said, I have a DNA match from AncestryDNA.com with a third to fourth cousin showing 90 CMs shared across 7 DNA segments. This cousin has 8 people on her tree with 2 surnames that I grew up with but never knew we were related in any way. What do the CMs mean again, and how do I begin using this data to unmask our common ancestor? And she said this is on her father's side. Thank you, Renee, for pointing that out.
Yes, thank you. I promise what I'm going to do, because rather than try to do this from memory and budget, it's been published, it's been vetted, it's a very good guideline that qualifies degrees of relationships based on how many CMs you share. So obviously, the more CMs you share with someone, say for instance, you're sharing 200 CMs with someone, that's a significant relationship. That's going to be much more, plus, the chances are it might be a much more recent thing than someone that you would share a lot less CMs with. But like I said, rather than me try to do it from memory, I will post a link to it. So basically, it breaks down that if you share X amount of CMs with someone, it is likely to be your parent. If you share B amount of CMs with someone, that's likely to be a sibling or a half sibling, aunt, uncle, first cousin, all the way down to like 12th cousin. So I will find that, and I will post that after the show.
Yeah, but I think she was I have it. It's on the Ancestry. I'm getting ready to post it onto there now.
Mm-hmm.
But her question is, you answered the CM's question again. The other part of her question, part 2 of her question, was, how do I begin using this data to unmask our common ancestor?
How well researched is the other person's tree? Meaning how far back? Do you even have any idea of who your common ancestors might be? Because you were saying that there were a couple of names that popped out to you, and there were names of people that you grew up with.
She said that there were 8 people on her tree with 2 surnames that she grew up with. Does that mean that your tree is that long, Renee? I mean, is only 8 people on the tree, or is 8 people that you can identify with? Let's see here. And I'm going to post that while we're waiting for her answer. I'm going to post that.
Well, I guess you and I have an easier time of it with Edgefield because, one, we're part of a big research group. We've been doing it for a long time, so our trees are huge. There's a lot of people, even though we may not always immediately remember a specific person in our tree. You tell me a name, you give me a surname from Edgefield, and I'm like, oh yeah, they married this family, that family, and other families. So when we get new DNA matches, and it's like, ooh, she's got Caldwell, Freeman, Gilchrist, Holloway, Peterson. We're like, yeah, we may not know immediately who the common ancestor is, but
But we know.
we can filter out so many other families and focus on 5 or 6 until we
So
start
she says
digging.
she has 400 on her tree, and that cousin only has 8 people on a tree. So
Uh,
you gonna have a, yeah.
yeah,
Y'all gonna have to work together on that one.
because this is Renee had a really really good question. Not everyone is on, literally on the same page, no pun intended, when it comes to building up family trees. So if you're working with someone who only has 8 people, they may not necessarily know that much about their family background. It is going to be much, much more difficult for you to figure out who that common ancestor might be. One thing that you might be able to do is take on within that window in Ancestry, take a look at your shared matches, the matches that both you and this other person share. And there may be other names out there that can help you really kind of filter out other families that you can just immediately eliminate. Go, yep, okay, it's not my Jones, it's not my Morgans, it's not my Borums. I can put all of those lines to one side. Like I said, those shared matches can sometimes really can be the key that unlocks that mystery. It's happened to Donya and I time and time again. We're like,
Too
oh
many
yeah,
times.
too many times. Did you hear the weariness in her voice? It's so
It's tiring. Oh my God. Like I cannot stress those times when we're doing the research on our families, when we're trying to break down a particular wall, and we have to go and use not just DNA. We're using DNA, we're using census records, we're using newspapers, we're using absolutely every land deeds, we're using wills, we're using inventories, everything to try to find out who's the mother of a child, because this child actually put their stepmother's name as their maiden name. And then the new stepmother has a whole nother name that it's just like it's the, oh my God, it's so, I'm sorry.
another trick you might want to do, Renee, is again, because you've got a larger tree, you're going to be more familiar with the common names that a lot of people in your family use. The other person with 8 may not have that kind of knowledge, but names, our ancestors, I think they try to give us as many clues in the names they chose for their children. So I'm going to use it for instance. A while back, Donya and I got a new DNA match. We didn't know who she was, didn't know that much about her. She didn't have a very large tree. But we looked at who she shared in common, and just certain people that we know, that Donya and I know really well, popped out to us. So, for instance, if I see the name Opal, I'm like, yeah, this is Settles. In some way, shape,
Yep.
or form, this is going to go back to the Settles. Oh, look, this person, their family used the name Savannah over and over and over again. Donya and I can say not only is she going to be a Settles, Savannah was a popular Williams family name in our old 96 family. We can even filter down to which Settles line our common ancestor most likely will be.
Yep.
And working with that person, getting them to concentrate and to give us as much information to work with. I would say 8 times out of 10, within a day or two, maybe a week, we finally get it. We finally
Yep.
figure it out.
And then another thing is that everybody needs to realize one of the things that it genealogical research is not as hard as you think it is. I mean, it's difficult because of the stuff that you learn, but you have to start thinking on a logical level. If you continue to think, if you don't think on a logical level, it's gonna be like you only knowing how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, but somebody puts a trigonometry test in front of you. Like yeah, you looking at that test like, excuse me, what? So you got to think logically. So what I mean by that is, like Brian just mentioned a name, and we can literally pinpoint certain things. That's it. At some point, it becomes a logical thought process. We started to realize that our families kept naming their children over and over and over again a particular name. and we didn't know. We might not know why, but they did when they were doing it. And the more you go into doing that, the more you start to realize, well, golly, these people are really doing this. They're really like naming their kids the same thing over and over again. Now, eventually it's going to start to get on your nerves because like Brian said, we have 1,000 Amandas on our tree. That's not a lie. We have Amandas. We have at least, speaking truthfully, we have at least 20 Amandas on our tree, carrying several different surnames. This is why our family is so intertwined with each other. This is why we are connected to over 200 surnames, not just because of Moses having 45 children and each one of them having kids, but because of the fact that even though in the 96, when we look at it now, it seems like it's big, back then it wasn't big, and they were right there. And it wasn't hard for somebody walking from one spot, from Orangeburg to Edgefield. It may seem far to us because we don't do that. We don't walk nowhere nowadays. You know, we catch an Uber across the street to get some toilet paper or something. But back then, our enslaved ancestors walked from Charleston to Edgefield. These were walking. Moses himself, who was born in Virginia but died in Barnwell, this man was an enslaved man. He walked. He did not ride. He walked. He was enslaved. So he left his footprint on 3 different states. But what makes it so fascinating is that they weren't even states when he left his footprints there. So that's what's fascinating about genealogy, and that's how you got to start thinking about it. You got to start thinking logically. You cannot take your modern thought mind into genealogical research. It's not going to work for you. It's going to be difficult. It's just simply not going to work. It's not.
You know, and again, we have a lot of hurdles to overcome. DNA is very good at pointing the way. And what Donya is saying is she and I are very good at thinking outside of the box. But that's because we've been doing this for a long time and we have a lot of experience under our belt to kind of read between the lines and figure out what it is the ancestors were trying to say. So a lot of my formerly enslaved ancestors who were liberated with the emancipation, well, they couldn't read and they couldn't write because it was illegal to teach slaves how to read and write. But what did they do? Name their children. That was one of the biggest keys to identifying who my white male Sheffey ancestor was, were the names that Jemima Sheffey chose for her children. She was pointing. That man right there, he fathered all of my children.
Yep. Yep.
That was the assumption, took the DNA test, and bang, there it was.
Yep.
Again, as we're saying with Edgefield, you give me the name Savannah, I'm going to tell you she's a Williams. You give me the name Alonzo, he's a Suttles. You give me the name Jefferson Davis, he's a Yeldo, or a Brooks.
Right. Or Augustus.
Or Augustus. Yep.
Augustus is whom?
Oh, you're testing me on that one now.
Yes, I am.
Who?
Okay, who? Oh, you don't know?
No, I've lost it. Who?
Okay, Augustus is Walker's.
Oh, Walker. Oh, yes.
There's so many Augustuses in the Walker family that is utterly ridiculous. It's another family too that's slipping my mind, but it's 2 families that the Augustus line they just rolled through. And then of course Petersons are Enochs. Yes. If you get an Enoch in your life, that's a Peterson, and run. But the Peterson line is something else. But it's 5:04, so I want you to tell them about the show, and your great news, and then I'll tell them about what the next show is going to be.
I can't tell them that yet because it's early days. But part of the Sheila Foundation, one of the questions you're going to be asked is if you would be comfortable and willing to appear on a television station, a TV show. So not this one, but a TV show. And that's all I can say about that for the time being.
Hint, 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 hint. We're praying, so we want y'all to pray too.
Please.
So, yes. So next week's show, well, not next week, week after next, because it's the first and third Sunday. So the first Sunday of April, let me rephrase it. We're going to do something different. We're going to now work on the Freedmen contracts. We may come back to this if you guys, want us to or whatever, but we're going to work on the Freedmen contracts, and I'm going to be able to tell you guys about why my Yeldales are so hard to find and how they actually just appeared one day, all because of the Freedmen contract.
So,
So
if
yeah.
I can jump in. So, if you have a family line, and Renee, you might want to check out next week too. One of our families in Edgefield, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Super Mario Brothers, the little characters called Magic Koopas that would appear, disappear, come over here, appear, and then
Oh my
disappear.
God.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about that kind of a family and the hell it is to research them next week, and how the Freedmen contracts and Freedmen bank records too can actually help you solve some of that. So yeah, if you have a family line, they appear in one census, they disappear completely, or they appear in one census, not the next, but 1940. Oh hey, I'm all the way over here. Yeah, you're gonna want to watch next week.
Yeah, that for the next show, I know I'm gonna have a lot of my Yeldale DNA family members gonna be up here because that's us. I'm gonna just be honest. The family he's talking about is my family, and people don't understand the hell that it is until they actually look at it, until they actually research it, until they actually experience researching a Yeldale person.
Oh,
Because
don't forget the other trait where you have a family that starts with one name and then
and ends with another.
yeah, for no known reason changes their name.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a part of the Yeldales. They are a huge hiding group. And they had like no other family. Like I said, Brian and I connect to over 200 surnames. There is not one of these surnames that are more elusive than the Yeldale line. Not one. Not one. I
So
cannot.
actually, if you know someone with the last name Yeldo, tell them about the show next week. Have them check.
Most definitely. So I'm Donya.
I'm Brian. Thank you once again for joining us.
Yes, we hope to see you guys April. What date is that? That the first Thursday, the first Sunday is, let me get that date for you real quick. The first Sunday is April the 8th. So we will see you guys April the 8th, 4 p.m. I'll be in my car chilling,
I'll be
calm,
here.
no kids, and we will be talking about Freedmen work contracts. See you guys then.
See
Bye.
you then. See you.